our federal government. And all I would point to is that back in early 2014, I was warning about when the president was saying that ISIS was a JV, I was saying something very different on the basis of the exact same information. In fact, ISIS has been a threat for a while. It wasn't called ISIS. But going back to 2012, I looked at the Syrian uprising. Let me explain the Syrian uprising. The Syrian uprising, Assad is a Alawi, which is basically a minority within a minority of Shia. Shia are a minority. Shia Islam is a minority in Syria. But the Alawis, who are a minority within that minority, govern the country. The majority of the country is Sunni. And they feel discriminated and oppressed by the Shia majority. And so they rose up against Assad. Not terrorists, just everyday Syrians rose up and said, we want a different government, like one that has people like us, at least in positions of influence. And Assad responded by barrel bombing them and killing them. And so it turned into a civil war. And I said at the time in 2012, if we don't find people in that Sunni community that are not terrorists and empower them, we can stay out. But if we don't find people that are non-jihadists and empower them, the jihadists from all over the world are going to see what's happening, and they're going to go there. Because this gives them an opportunity to establish a foothold. And that's exactly what happened. This Al-Qaeda in Iraq, that had now moved into Syria after being driven out of Iraq by Sunnis, used this vacuum, this civil war, as an opportunity. Not just to grow, but to attract foreign fighters. They also recruited former members of Saddam Hussein's army in order to professionalize their military operations. And they grew into a threat. A vacuum was created. We did not empower the non-jihadists to fill it, and as a result, ISIS filled it. I was warning about that in 2012, throughout 2013, on the basis of the exact same information the president had access to. And in 2014, when they came over from Iraq, from Syria and into Iraq, and he called them the JV, I remember standing up on the floor of the Senate saying, this is a serious threat, and they're only going to get stronger in the weeks to come. So I think perhaps what you're alluding to is some reports that the intelligence assessments that have been given to the president about the success of our campaign were exaggerated. I would also point there and say that I've been making warnings about that too. How could just 2 days, bad timing, 2 days before the attack in Paris, the president was talking about how ISIS was contained. Well, I don't know how he could say that when he knows for a fact that ISIS in Libya is growing like gangbusters. If you were a foreign fighter, I know no one here is, but if you were a foreign fighter that today called up 1-800-ISIS or whatever their number is, and you said, I want to join ISIS, you know where they're going to tell you to go? They're going to bring you into Libya. That is where their travel office is. That is where they are attracting people from all over the world to train them. You know why? Because they're not fighting with anyone in Libya. They have a prime operational space. From Libya, they're conducting operations in the Sinai, which puts them just a skip away from Israel and right at the edge of Egypt, of Cairo. And so my point to you is, this group is growing in influence in Libya. They're growing in influence in Afghanistan. I've been saying that for months. In Afghanistan right now, ISIS is going to the Taliban fighters, the mid-level fighters and commanders, and saying to them, you know, the Taliban hasn't won anything in 10 years. But we, ISIS, keep winning. We kill people in Paris, we kill people in Mali, join us instead of them. You know why? Because they're trying to become the predominant group in Afghanistan. They're now starting to pop up in Pakistan, which is a nuclear-armed country. That country, if that ever falls, we got a huge problem on our hands. They just conducted a very high-profile attack in Beirut about a week and a half ago. As I already mentioned, they have operations in the Sinai. They have affiliates, I believe, up to 13 or 14 countries, including the Caucasus. Not the Iowa Caucasus, the Caucasus. My point to you is, don't worry, we're good. My point to you is, they've been expanding, not shrinking. I don't know what he's talking about, containment. Maybe he interpreted it that way, but he might be the only one, because everyone knows what a threat they pose, and what a growing threat they pose. And so, I'm not sure about the specific article you're referring to or the news, but I've been warning about ISIS before most of the world knew about them, and I've been warning about their growth over the last 2 years consistently, based on the exact same information the president has access to.